We're a month away from pitchers and catchers reporting, so of course you guys have plenty of questions, and we'll answer a few of those on today's episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, January 15th, 2024. This is Ty Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today over at jasemedical.com and use the promo code Locked On. That's LOCKDON to get $20 off your order. That's JASE Medical.com. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. We love to hear from you. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. This is Mailbag Monday, the show where we answer your Mariners questions. Let's get into them. We're going to start with Mariners to the Moon, who says, I'm sure that it's just leveraging by Scott Boras, but all offseason, national media has continually referenced the Mariners as being one of the teams who are in on Cody Bellinger despite their financial restrictions. Do you think there's any smoke there given the consistent linking?
Has it been consistent linking? I feel like Nightingale yesterday says that they're lurking, which isn't even really linking them to the Mariners, just that they're.
I'm trying to remember, because I have heard Cody Bellinger and the Mariners a couple of times from national reporters. I think Morosi was just speculating like he always does. He was just yapping because that's what he does. I think Feinsand might have said something about them and Bellinger as well at some point. I can't remember, though. I'm not super clear on that.
I don't know, because like we know for a fact that like they were linked by multiple national people to like Garver and Soler.
Yeah,
I don't remember that same kind of attention being paid to Bellinger, but regardless, no, I don't think there's much of a shot here. I think what's pretty interesting is that I think it's more the years that Jerry's gonna hold his nose up at, like, because the report is that Bellinger wants like 8 and 200, and that's a huge risk considering the guy has had one good year out of the last 3, and there are some troubling exit velo and batted ball data that suggests that last year was kind of fluky. So there's some issues there with Bellinger. So 8 and 200, that's not going to happen, but apparently the league has agreed so far. It only takes one team, but no team has stepped up. And so I think, maybe $25 million a year, if Jerry could get that for 4 years, 5 years, he might be interested. But then again, if you're Bellinger, like if you can only get a 4 or 5 year deal, why not just take a 1-year deal and just go back to Chicago or Toronto, where, offensive environment's a little more friendly to you, and just try and hit the market again next year after some of the RSN stuff is figured out. So there's a very fine line where I think like the number that Bellinger is willing to accept is not going to overlap with a number that Jerry DiPoto is going to feel comfortable offering him. I don't think there's really any overlap there. Because I think if you're Bellinger, you want to hit the market ASAP if you're not going to get the long-term like career-defining contract this winter, and it doesn't seem like he's going to. So, I mean, you could like theoretically, even with their limited payroll, if they have as much as we think they have, could they afford to pay Cody Bellinger? Yes.
Yeah.
They could fit him under the payroll. You could backload it. You can, buyouts and opt-outs.
That's one of the ways that you could use that money that you freed up by trading Robbie.
Sure. Right. It'd pretty much take everything you have for this year, almost certainly, but the longer the deal, the more you could backload it. So if it's like a 7-8 year deal, like, you could pay him like $3 million this year and still have $10-15 million in theory.
Right.
But that's just not going to work. Like there's too many red flags on Bellinger, the player. There's too many obstacles on getting a contract that Bellinger will accept that is acceptable to the Mariners. I just don't see a way that they're going to get that done because there's too many obstacles to overcome. So
Yeah.
Bellinger's a pretty good fit. And obviously, if they figure it out, be pretty excited. It's a big swing.
Yeah.
But I think more than anything, it's the years that are going to, kind of deter the Mariners because, I was thinking about this the other day. How many contracts of longer than 5 years has Jerry Dipoto given out in his tenure as Mariners GM?
One
It's
guy.
only one.
Yeah.
Julio.
Yeah.
Robbie Ray was 5 years. They were willing to go 5 years on Simeon. They were willing to go 5 years on Story.
Yeah.
That's it. Castillo got 5 years. Like, it seems like 5 is kind of the cutoff for Jerry. And obviously that's fluid. That's, fluid. He will alter like for Julio, but I just don't see it. I don't think that. I think once you get under 5 or 6 years, Bellinger's out on the Mariners, and I think the Mariners are out on Bellinger when he gets over 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I think Mariners to the moon here is right that this is just a leverage play by Boras to put more pressure on the Cubs, who seem to be the essentially the front runner for Bellinger for him to
Maybe
return to Chicago. They might be the only team. I mean, the Blue Jays also getting mentioned in that article makes more sense because we know that Bellinger has gone to visit Toronto with his wife. So I assume that he's met with the Blue Jays in some capacity. So maybe it's also to a lesser degree to put some pressure on the Blue Jays as well. I mean, maybe he's met with the Mariners and they've actually had some discussions and they've swapped numbers and all that, and we just don't know about it. And obviously the Mariners notoriously don't leak things, so maybe that's been going on behind the scenes.
Notoriously does. So
yeah, that's true too. So that goes both ways. I don't really see this happening because I think the only way that the Mariners would land Bellinger is if it's a 1-year deal or it's a 1+1, and they could manipulate the money a little bit that way by converting it into a buyout and all that, some of it into a buyout. But at that point, if his market gets to the point where he's actually open to taking a 1-year deal, then a lot more teams are going to be interested in that as well. So it's like, what separates the Mariners from that pack? That's really my question there at that point. But yeah, I definitely see kind of where the league is assessing him right now, where it's, 2021 and 2022 were very concerning. We don't buy 2023, especially with some of the underlying numbers like you mentioned, Colby. So we need to see you do it again. And so I think at that point, yeah, I think a 1-year deal for Bellinger makes some sense. He can prove that he can do it again for yet another year. And maybe at that point, teams are going to be more open to the 6, 7, 8-year deals with Bellinger next offseason. All right, we got more of your questions coming up here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by both FanDuel and eBay Motors. All right, Sailors, the NFL regular season may be over, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. And the app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. You can also find bets in the new Explore tab and make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. It's the best way to find popular parlays. While the Seahawks are done, Mariners baseball is almost here, folks. So is betting on Mariners baseball. But while you wait for the boys to take the field, you can still bet on the Kraken and Huskies basketball. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn, that's LOCKEDON, and make your first bet a layup. Again, that is FanDuel.com/LockedOn, LOCKEDON. FanDuel, official partner of the National Football League. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into an MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Again, that is ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. And as a reminder, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this is Mailbag Monday. We're answering some of your Mariners questions. Alex wants to know, do you think an all right-handed pitching starting rotation is necessarily a bad thing? And if so, should the team be more aggressive about trading for a left-handed pitcher?
No.
Next question. No, I mean, like if the righties all, are very good, right? Like if all of your righties are Luis Castillo, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, Brian Wu, Bryce Miller, you're in a good spot. I don't really care what their handedness is.
You're not getting a worse starting pitcher,
because of
just
handedness.
because it's left-handed.
Yeah.
Like, no, you get the 5 best guys you can, or, well, you need like 7 or 8, but you know what I mean? Like, the 5 best guys at the start of the year, they're in your rotation, and that's that.
Yep.
So don't worry about handedness.
What do you think of the minor league deals the M's signed this week? Could any of the players make a potential impact? So we're talking about Kirby Sneed, Jonathan Diaz. I'm ignoring you. Corey Abbott. We'll also throw Mauricio Rivera in there, even though he wasn't a minor league deal. He was a waiver claim, so he's a 40-man guy. But we'll talk a little bit about those guys. Abbott's got a nice curveball, but not a lot of success at the major league level. We'll see what they do with that. The thing that we always say with relievers and the Mariners is that they typically they identify one thing that you're really good at and try to emphasize that even more so. So I think with Abbott, they're going to really hyper focus on the curveball with him. Snead has a really nice slider. I think he only gave up like a 29.3% hard hit rate this year, something like that. So generates weak contact. Probably should get him throwing the slider more. Maybe get away from the sinker and have him throw his 4-seamer more. Jonathan Diaz, don't know much about him. I just think that he's kind of a camp body. There isn't really anything there that impresses me. And then Mauricio Rivera, similar idea to Justin Topa, sinker slider guy. Did give up quite a bit of hard contact this year, but he missed barrels, which is good. And he was able to keep the ball on the ground quite a bit. So, yeah.
Good slider shape. Kind of throws from a unique arm slot. It's not crazy or anything, but it's just a little bit different release point than most pitchers.
Yep.
No, I haven't seen anybody who I think is going to make an impact. And you forgot Michael Chavis, who probably has the best track record of all of them.
Yeah, Michael Chavis, utility infielder for the most part. He
plays
has
some defense.
He has played
runner.
some corner outfield, but not a lot. Yeah, solid defender. Can run the bases fairly well. Just hasn't been able to hit at all. 2019 is his career year in that regard, and he was a 96 WRC plus guy, so he was slightly below average in his career year offensively.
Yeah, he's probably this year's Colin Moran.
Sure.
But I haven't seen anybody yet that I'm looking at, and I'm going like, oh, that could be your Mike Ford this year. Maybe that guy is Mike Ford, by the way. Still hasn't signed, so based on who they've signed so far, nobody's really jumped out.
No,
they all just kind of seem like camp bodies and AAA depth to me.
But with the pitchers, you never know.
Yep,
you never know. All right. Patrick wants to know, what kind of return could trading Anthony DeSclafani get the M's, and would they have to eat some of his contract? Yes, and that's like the reason that you would trade DeSclafani is to get rid of as much money as possible. There's really no prize to trading DeSclafani other than getting as much money off of your books as possible if they feel the need to do that, right? Again, going back to the start of the show, if you need a couple of extra million to comfortably sign Cody Bellinger, trade Anthony DeSclafani. And I think with the way that or with how much money like number fives are signing for. They're signing for roughly $8 to $10 million in this market right now. I think there will be teams that are interested in DeSclafani, especially if the Mariners are willing to eat half.
Yeah.
Make him essentially like a $5-6 million pitcher for whoever acquires him. I think there will be some interest in that, but I also think the Mariners do see some value in him as essentially their sixth starter swingman type out of the bullpen. And I think that they're more than willing to hold on to that if they don't really get a deal that they like that allows them, or if they don't really see any practicality to freeing up that money.
Yeah. So basically there's 3 type of trades you can make with DeSclafani. You could either eat, a good chunk of that salary.
Yep.
But at some point you're eating so much and you're losing the valuable role that it just makes more sense just to keep him, because you're not getting anything of significance for DeSclafani.
No.
So either you eat most of that money, you get like a 28-year-old AA prospect, and now you have to go out and get a number 6 starter, which is probably going to cost you roughly the amount that you saved. So there's a problem with that. The second option is that you could try and trade him for another high price contract, and just kind of either a bad contract swap, or just you use him to pay down the price of another guy that you're trying to acquire. For example, Josh Bell's making $16 million. The Mariners want Josh Bell. They trade DeSclafani, and now Josh Bell is only a plus $4 million player for them.
Right.
Not that that makes any sense. Of course, Miami doesn't need pitching, but you get the point.
Right.
The third way is probably going to be the least popular way, and that's that you attach another good player to DeSclafani to move his salary, the Jared Kelenic method. So, yeah, that one didn't go over too well last time. So I doubt they're going to do that again. All 3 of those are highly unlikely because, again, you can't really find the bad contract swap you want to make.
Yeah.
So I think if you're going to trade DeSclafani for anything that makes it worth trading him for, you're going to have to attach a pretty good prospect or a pretty good young player to the deal. So I just don't see a point. Unless they really think DeSclafani is cooked and they just want to, some teams out there willing to, pay DeSclafani $6 million and you just say, okay, here, you can have him.
Or again, they feel that they need the $6 million to help them get, again, for just the sake of the example, Cody Bellinger. And they'll just take the 28-year-old AA prospect, like you said, and take that $6 million and go give it to Cody Bellinger, right?
Sure. They'll just trade Chris Flexen for Taylor Muckenhern again.
Right. Yeah, it'll basically just be that. So I think that should be on the table for them, depending on what waters they're swimming in.
It should be. I mean, it's probably something they would like to do, but again, they still have to go and replace that role. Like DeSclafani's role is actually an important one, and the Mariners don't really have an answer there. So, yeah.
All right, so we got a few more of your questions coming up here in just a moment. But once again, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Jase Medical. So I know we look to sports to escape from some of the, the crazy realities of real life. But can we talk just for a minute about actually preparing for real life? Because I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than, for example, if a loved one of mine got sick while a supply chain issue was all that was keeping them from the life-saving medication they needed. But thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including stuff like, UTIs, respiratory infections, skin infections, and many others. And this stuff could happen to any of us. That's just the reality of it. So visit jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular costs. It has never been more important to be prepared than it is today. So go to jasemedical.com. Again, that is JASE medical.com, and use the promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen here on Mailbag Monday. We're going to continue here with Connor. How many of Seattle's top 30 MLB pipeline prospects can we realistically expect debuts from in 2024? We've answered some form of this question a lot this offseason about who we could see come up from the farm, but specifically looking at pipelines list. I'm actually going to bring that up right now for the Mariners. I think there's like 5 guys, because you're also asking about debuts, right? So I think like Prolander Baroa doesn't count. Ty Adcock doesn't count here. So looking at the names on here, Blake Hunt, Jimmy Joyce, potentially, Zach DeLoach, Ryan Bliss, Tyler
Locklear. Yep.
I think that's it. I don't think we're going to see Alberto Rodriguez or anyone like that. And then again, like we've said, Cole Young kills it again this year. Maybe in August or September we'll see him, sure. But he's going to have another year like the one that he's coming off of.
Dollard's kind of the X factor here. You have to kind of figure out how he's doing on his major shoulder injury.
Yep.
And if the Mariners think that he's healthy, he could be that DeSclafani replacement. So it's just, do you want to have DeSclafani or do you want to have Dollard and Hancock as your like 6-7 when both of those guys have had shoulder issues like recently? That's risky. So yeah, just based on the top 30, like, and not counting guys who've already made their debut, maybe Clase, but he's got a lot of work to do. Yeah. Maybe Clase, but Locklear probably, Bliss, probably at some point. Then it's Dollard, DeLoach, Joyce, and Hunt. I think not a ton this year. Next year, it's going to be a different story, because next year we're probably talking about Emerson having a shot even. But we're talking about Ford, we're talking about Young, we're talking, pretty much most of the top 10. I mean, at that point, certainly Clase, if these guys are still here, obviously.
Yeah.
Gonzalez might make sense at some point in 2025. So yeah, next year is kind of the year where where a lot of guys can make a jump and help you. But this year, a lot of role players.
Clase definitely makes a lot of sense in terms of, and this depends on how his year goes, but like he makes a lot of sense just at least from a September roster expansion standpoint. 5th, 6th outfielder who can seal you a bag in a certain situation if you need him to. Mm-hmm. Same with like if you have a playoff, if you make it to the playoffs, you could put Jonathan Clase on your playoff roster and he probably helps you at some point. Mm-hmm. So so I don't know, 6-7 guys on the pipeline, top 30 that could potentially make their debut this year. So keep an eye on those guys. All right. Next question here from Kip. Has your outlook on ownership changed any with teams like Texas also holding back on spending due to cable deals? No, not at all. Not whatsoever. Just because other teams are doing it doesn't make the actions of Mariners ownership less bad.
Nope. A group of bad people is still a group of bad people.
It's just par for the course with MLB owners for the most part, who showed us their true colors. If we hadn't already seen them before, they showed us their true colors during the pandemic, during all those negotiations in terms of ramping the season back up, the next year with the lockout, all that. We know what they're about. We know what their bottom line is. We know what their main goal is, at least most of them.
Sure. The owners do not care about you. They do not care about baseball. They care about their bottom line. And just because most of them are that way doesn't mean that we don't get to criticize John Stanton.
Right. Yeah, I think the only thing that this says is, this isn't a problem that's exclusive to the Mariners. This is a league-wide issue that should be addressed. Probably never will be, though.
No. Even Rob Manfred knows that this should be addressed.
Yeah.
He's just powerless to do anything about it.
Yep. All right, last question here from Christopher. Would love for y'all to talk more about international signing, its significance, and the process.
Basically, it's South America and Latin America. Technically, you can be involved in this if you're from Japan or Korea, but most of the time those guys play in their league for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. So usually it's just kind of Central and South America free agents, teenagers older than 16 by date X. I'm not sure what it is, but they're typically now 16 and 17 when they sign. They're free agents. They're free to sign with anybody. Every team has a bonus pool, just like they do for the MLB draft. There are penalties if you exceed it, but basically you can sign as many guys as you can fit in that bonus pool.
Mhm.
And there is no limit to the size of the contract you can give, big or small. If you want to sign a teenager to $5,000, you can do that. I'm pretty sure Altuve got $5,000, like at an open tryout. So you can sometimes find gems like that, but yeah, it's pretty much, it's really a seedy, like scummy type of
Yeah.
venture too. Like these teenagers, they're picked for like these academies at like 11, 12. They have
But
handlers.
they basically have these agreements in place for
Yeah.
like from 12, 13 years old. I mean, Starlin Aguilar is one of the names, more recent names that come to mind, where I remember seeing pictures of him in Mariners gear years ago.
Right. Typically, you kind of, it's about relationships down there, right? You get in good with a trainer, like a trainer who at an academy, and they kind of nudge their their impressionable young kid to take that money, and then they usually get a kickback, basically for acting like the kid's agent.
Yeah.
Technically, you can't sign until you're 16, but you can exchange numbers and have handshake agreements at 14 years old, 15 years old. Happens all the time. And basically, we know who everybody's going to sign with a couple years in advance because there's like this handshake agreement amongst every team in baseball that you don't poach another team's guys. So once the 14-year-old decides he wants to play for Team X, again at 14 years old, basically there's an agreement from everybody else that you stay away from that player. So it's not a good thing. It's an important thing, but it's not good. It's not well regulated. A lot of these kids, they get taken advantage of. They get bad advice. They get locked into these decisions. They imagine how different, like think about when you were 14 and when you were 17, like how much different you were in between those two ages. Doesn't matter to these kids. They said they wanted to be a Padre when they were 14. So no other team's going to offer them a contract. So they're just stuck being a Padre, right? Or a Ray or whatever. So yeah, it's pretty standard, right? You can sign anybody you want. I think Australia is technically also a part of this, but typically it's Central and South America, the Caribbean, those countries. You can sign anybody who's over the age of 16. Yeah, pretty much anybody who's over the age of 16. Every team has a bonus pool that they know about, and that's the pool of money they use to sign these guys. You can go over, but there are penalties. You could spend none of it. It's pretty wide open. I choose not to follow it. It's kind of gross, honestly.
All right, that is going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Dane Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Ty Dane Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.